This shouldn't happen. This just should not happen. I was sure I'd be court-martialed, and I was just hoping they'd make it a court-martial and not just shoot me.
April 18th, 1942. 7:20 hours. North Pacific, 650 nautical miles from Japan. The deck of the USS Hornet is a scene of controlled chaos. It's a place where nothing belongs. Salt spray, cold and sharp, lashes across the flight deck, freezing on the metal skins of 16 U.S. Army Air Force's B-25B Mitchell bombers. They are chained down, straining against their bonds like angry dogs, their engines popping and coughing in the raw, damp air. The aircraft carrier pitches and rolls violently in the heavy seas, waves breaking over the bow, sending green water sluicing past the bomber's landing gear. This is all wrong. On the bridge, Vice Admiral William Bull Halsey grips the railing, his knuckles white. His ships, Task Force 16, are the most precious assets the U.S. Navy has left in the Pacific, and they are exposed. Just an hour ago, at 0630, a lookout screamed, "Enemy vessel, starboard bow!" It was the Nidomaru No. 23, a Japanese picket boat. The cruiser USS Nashville opened fire, tearing the small vessel apart, but not before its radio operator desperately keyed a message. 3 enemy carriers, course east. The message was wrong. There were only 2, Hornet and Enterprise. But the damage was done. The Japanese knew they were here. The plan was to launch at 450 miles. Now, they are 650 miles out. A 200-mile difference that may as well be an ocean. On the pitching flight deck stands Lieutenant Colonel James "Jimmy" Doolittle. He is 45 years old, a pioneer of aviation, a man who has done more impossible things in the air than any man alive. But this is a one-way ticket. He had told his men, "There's a good chance most of us will not come back." He had trained them for weeks at Eglin Field, Florida, teaching Army pilots to hurl their 10-ton medium bombers off a 500-foot strip of painted runway, an act that defied physics. Now, he has to do it for real, in a gale, hundreds of miles earlier than planned. He knows the math. The fuel calculations are no longer just thin. They are fictional. Reaching their designated landing strips in China after bombing Japan is now a near impossibility. But the alternative is to scrub the mission, to dump the bombers overboard and run, to fail. 4 months ago, Pearl Harbor was burning. The Arizona was at the bottom of the harbor. The U.S. battle line was shattered, and the Japanese Empire seemed invincible, rolling across the Pacific like a tide. America was desperate, not for a victory, but for a counterpunch. Just one. A signal to the world and to themselves that they were still in the fight. This raid was President Roosevelt's personal demand. Strike Tokyo. Halsey's signal lamp flashes from the Enterprise. Launch planes. To Colonel Doolittle and his gallant command, good luck and God bless you. It's 8:20. Doolittle pulls himself into the cockpit of his plane, the ruptured duck, though its nose art is not yet painted. He looks at his co-pilot, Lieutenant Richard Cole. No words are needed. The Hornet turns into the 40-knot wind, its bow plunging. A flight deck officer waves the flag, drops to his knees, and Doolittle shoves the throttles forward. The 2 Wright Cyclone engines scream, a deafening, tearing roar that cuts through the wind. The B-25 strains, its brakes whining. He releases them. The bomber, loaded with 4 500-pound bombs and extra fuel tanks, lumbers forward. The deck is rising and falling 30 feet. The plane seems to move in slow motion. The sailors watching hold their breath. It looks too heavy, too slow. The end of the deck rushes toward them. Doolittle hauls back on the yoke. The bomber drops off the bow. vanishing for a heart-stopping second. Then, fighting the air, it claws its way upward, its wings wobbling just feet above the waves. It is airborne. One by one, 15 more follow. For 60 agonizing minutes, the Hornet launches its brood. Then, the carriers turn hard to starboard, fleeing for their lives back to Pearl Harbor. The 16 bombers are alone, flying in ones and twos, wave-hopping above the cold Pacific. They are 10,000 men, spread across 16 aircraft, flying toward the most heavily defended city on Earth, armed with the knowledge that they have just enough fuel to get there, but not enough to get home. For nearly 6 hours they fly. The B-25s are aluminum skins stretched over vibrating steel, and the men inside are prisoners of the noise. They fly at wave-top height, sometimes just 50 feet above the churning gray water, a tactic to evade Japanese radar. Inside the cramped cockpits, the pilots, men like Lieutenant Edgar Ski Miller flying the 8th plane, or Captain Doc White in the 15th, stare at the fuel gauges. The needles are already dropping faster than the charts predicted. Every minute the coast of China gets further away. Around noon, the Japanese coastline slides into view. The tension inside the bombers spikes. Gunners check their 50 caliber machine guns. Bombardiers arm their 500-pound demolition and incendiary bombs. This is it. But the sky is empty. There are no zeros, no flak. As they cross the coastline, Doolittle's group climbs to 1,200 feet. Below them, the Japanese countryside is serene. Farmers in fields look up and wave. Children on a school rooftop point, their gestures friendly. The B-25s, with their twin tails and high wings, are mistaken for a new type of Japanese, or perhaps Allied German bomber. The illusion is perfect. Tokyo, 12:15 p.m. The capital of the empire. The city is sprawling, a mix of ancient wood and modern concrete. It's lunchtime. Air raid sirens begin their mournful rising wail, but few pay attention. These are yobokeikai, practice drills. They happen all the time. Then the world explodes. In his B-25, Jimmy Doolittle's bombardier, Sergeant Fred Bramer, shouts, "Bombs away!" Their 4 incendiary clusters drop, aimed at a factory district. Behind them, Lieutenant Travis Hoover's plane roars over the city. Explosions walk across munitions plants and steelworks. The Japanese defenses are caught utterly, humiliatingly asleep. Anti-aircraft batteries open up, but their fire is sporadic, panicked. The gunners are firing at practice altitudes, their shells bursting harmlessly thousands of feet above the low-flying American bombers. Miles away, at the Yokosuka Naval Base, the crew of the carrier Ryuho, in dry dock, stare in disbelief as Captain David M. Jones' B-25 thunders past. His bombs slam into the dry dock, damaging the ship and stunning the Naval Command. In the Navy Ministry building in Tokyo, the mood is one of disbelief. Staff officers are running through the halls, reports crackling over the radio. Enemy bombers over Nagoya, Kobe, Osaka. It is impossible. The Americans are crippled, thousands of miles away, licking their wounds in Hawaii. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, is not in Tokyo. He is on his flagship Yamato at Hashirajima. But the men of the Imperial General Staff are in the capital. They are the architects of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. the men who assured the emperor that the Homeland was inviolable, a sacred fortress protected by the shield of the Imperial Navy. An unnamed admiral, a man who has spent his life believing in the supremacy of Japanese spirit and the divinity of his homeland, is walking to a meeting when the detonations rattle the windows. He stops. The sound is wrong, not a drill. He moves to the window, pushing it open, and looks out. What he sees freezes his blood. A twin-engine, twin-tailed American bomber, a Mitchell, is screaming down a boulevard, lower than the rooftops of the tallest buildings. It is so close he can see the faint U.S. Army markings under the wing. It is a phantom, a ghost from another reality, banking hard around the Diet building. He sees it. The barbarian is inside the gates. In that instant, the war changes. The physical damage is negligible. A few factories hit, a carrier in dry dock damaged, perhaps 90 civilians killed. The psychological damage is catastrophic. This is not a military strike. It is a spiritual defilement. The Americans have flown over the Emperor's palace. They have proven that the Imperial Navy, the pride of the nation, has failed in its most fundamental duty, to protect the Emperor himself. For the Admirals in Tokyo, the shame is a physical sickness. They have been made fools. As the bombers race southwest, climbing into the clouds, their engines straining, they leave behind a city in panic and a high command consumed by a cold, unifying rage. The immediate question is not how much damage, but how did they get here? Picket boats. The radio message from the Nido Maru. It clicks into place. They didn't come from an island. They didn't come from China. They came from a carrier. Admiral Yamamoto, receiving the fragmented reports on the Yamato, understands immediately. His entire war strategy has been built on the idea of a decisive battle, of luring the American carriers out. Now, the carriers have come to him. They have struck the heart. The disease, as he sees it, is the American carrier fleet, and it must be eradicated. The Doolittle Raid, a mission of pinpricks, has just signed the death warrant for the Japanese carriers at a place that isn't yet on any map of importance, a tiny atoll called Midway. The sun is a blurred orange smear dipping into a bank of dark, gathering clouds over the East China Sea. For the 80 men of the Doolittle Raid, the euphoria of survival over Tokyo is long gone, replaced by a cold, grinding calculus. They have been in the air for over 13 hours. The fuel gauges in all 16 B-25s are hovering on E. Jimmy Doolittle, flying in the blackening sky, knows the mission is now entering its most dangerous phase. The plan was to land at Chuchao Airfield, refuel, and fight another day from China. But the early launch didn't just burn fuel, it burned daylight. And the Chinese airfields, not expecting the raiders until tomorrow, have not turned on their homing beacons. Even if they had, it wouldn't matter. A massive, churning storm front is moving in from the south, blotting out the world in a wall of rain and wind. They are flying blind, out of gas, and out of time. Inside the cramped fuselage of the ruptured duck, the 9th plane off the deck, Pilot Lieutenant Ted W. Lawson fights the controls. His navigator, Lieutenant Charles R. McClure, stares desperately at his charts, trying to find a landmark, a river, anything in the impenetrable blackness. The radio is useless, crackling with static. They are completely alone. The port engine sputters, catches, and sputters again. Then it dies. The plane lurches, Lawson hits the engine fire extinguisher, his voice strained over the intercom. "Prepare to ditch!" Minutes later, in Doolittle's plane, the red warning light flashes. Both engines cough. Doolittle gives the order, his voice calm. "This is it, boys. Bail out. Get your chutes." One by one, his crew slides out of the belly hatch, vanishing into the howling darkness. Doolittle is the last to go, tumbling into the night over a Chinese mountain. Across a 100-mile stretch of storm, this scene repeats. Men who had survived the anti-aircraft fire of Tokyo are now facing a more primitive enemy. Gravity. Plane number 15, the Avenger, simply flies out over the sea until its fuel is exhausted and it plunges into the water, vanishing with all 5 of its crew. Lawson, in the ruptured duck, sees a strip of sand in the gloom, the coastline. He fights to bring the plane down. It hits the surf, cartwheels, and disintegrates. The impact is horrific. Lawson's leg is nearly severed. His crew is scattered, broken, in the wreckage. This is the true cost of the raid. Of the 16 planes, not one lands safely. They are all destroyed, ditched, crashed in mountains, or pancaked into rice paddies. Of the 80 men, 3 die in the crashes. 8 are captured by the Japanese, where they will face torture, starvation, and execution as war criminals. But in Tokyo, the fate of the American crews is irrelevant. The lights at the Imperial General Headquarters are burning bright. The shame of the raid has galvanized the entire military structure. On the Yamato, Admiral Yamamoto does not need to argue. The admirals of the Navy General Staff, the men who had resisted his plans, who favored a southern strategy toward Australia, are now silent. The Emperor himself has asked the question that seals their fate. How can this be allowed to happen again? The answer is simple. It cannot. The American carriers, the Hornet and the Enterprise, must be destroyed. Yamamoto's Operation MI is no longer just a plan. It is an imperial directive. It is a masterpiece of Japanese complexity. A feint toward the Aleutian Islands in the north to draw American attention. Then, the main thrust. A massive invasion fleet supported by Admiral Nagumo's Kido Butai, the 6-carrier strike force that hit Pearl Harbor, will seize Midway Atoll. When the remaining American carriers race from Hawaii to stop them, Yamamoto will be waiting 300 miles to the west with the main battle line, including the super battleship Yamato. He will annihilate them in the decisive battle he has always craved. The Doolittle Raid has done exactly what Roosevelt hoped. It has forced the Japanese hand. It has made them arrogant, angry, and above all, predictable. They are so focused on their own complex trap that they fail to ask the most important question. In Pearl Harbor, in a damp, secure basement known as Station Hypo, the cryptanalysts of the Combat Intelligence Unit are listening. Commander Joseph Rochefort and his team have been intercepting Japanese naval signals for months. The Doolittle Raid creates a spike in Japanese radio traffic, a furious, panicked chatter. And in that chatter, the codebreakers hear a new, urgent name, repeated over and over. AF. The Japanese believe their codes are unreadable. They believe their plan is secret. They are wrong. The Americans don't know what AF is, but they know it's the target. They know it's the key to the entire Japanese offensive. And as the scattered, Wounded survivors of the Doolittle Raid are carried on the backs of Chinese peasants, trying to escape the Japanese patrols. They have no idea that their desperate, one-way mission has just set the stage for the battle that will win the Pacific. May 14, 1942. 2 hours. Pearl Harbor, U.S. Naval Base. 16 fathoms beneath the surface of the naval base, in a windowless, concrete-lined vault. The air is thick with cigarette smoke, sweat, and the electric hum of decoding machines. This is Station Hypo, the Combat Intelligence Unit. It is the brain of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, and it is a place of ghosts and whispers. Seated at a metal desk, his eyes burning, is Commander Joseph Rochefort. He hasn't seen sunlight in days. He lives in this basement, often working in his slippers and a maroon smoking jacket over his uniform, fueled by endless pots of coffee. Around him, his team of cryptanalysts, linguists, mathematicians, and crossword puzzle fiends stare at columns of 5-digit numbers. The intercepted traffic of the Japanese Navy's JN-25 code. They have a problem. The Doolittle Raid opened a fire hose of Japanese radio traffic, and in that flood, the designation AF appears again and again. It is the target of Yamamoto's massive offensive. But what is AF? The intelligence community is torn. Washington, D.C., OP-20G, is convinced AF is in the Aleutians, or perhaps even an invasion of Hawaii itself. But Rochefort, staring at the message flow, at the call signs of the carriers and support ships, feels in his gut they are wrong. His analysis of the traffic patterns suggests a target much closer, a pincer movement aimed at something small, central. "It's Midway, sir," he insists to his superiors, but he can't prove it. And Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet, needs proof. Nimitz is a man trapped. He has just taken command of a shattered fleet. He has only 3 carriers left in the entire Pacific, the Hornet and Enterprise, just returned from the Doolittle Raid, and the Yorktown, limping back from the Battle of the Coral Sea with a hole in its flight deck. Yamamoto is coming for him, with at least 8 carriers, or so they think, and the largest battleship fleet ever assembled. If Nimitz guesses wrong, he doesn't just lose a battle, he loses the entire war. He will be sending his last 3 ships into a trap. "Joe," Nimitz says, his voice quiet, "I need to be sure." Rochefort goes back to his basement. How do you make a silent enemy speak? You trick him. On May 18th, Rochefort meets with Captain Edwin Layton, Nimitz's fleet intelligence officer. Rochefort has a plan, a dirty trick worthy of a spy novel. He asks Nimitz to order the U.S. submarine Cachalot to send a message to the garrison at Midway Atoll. That message, sent via a secure underwater cable, instructs Midway to do something bizarre. May 19th, Midway Atoll. A nervous radio operator on the tiny island taps out a message in the clear, using a non-secure channel that he knows the Japanese are listening to. The message: urgent, freshwater distillation plant breakdown, require immediate assistance. Back in Station Hypo, the air is electric. Rochefort and his team wait. They are a spider that has just plucked a single thread of the web. Now, they listen for the vibration. For 2 days, silence. Then, on May 21st, it comes. A Japanese listening post in the Marshall Islands sends a coded JN-25 message to the combined fleet. The intercept lands on a desk at Station Hypo. Rochefort's best men, including Lieutenant Commander Thomas Dyer, pounce on it. They strip away the additive ciphers, work through the code books. The message is short. The translation slides onto Rochefort's desk. It reads, AF is short on fresh water. Attack force will bring own water provisions. Rochefort grabs the paper. He runs from the basement, up the stairs, and bursts into Nimitz's office, still in his slippers, waving the flimsy. Admiral, Rochefort says, his voice raw. AF is Midway. The gamble has paid off. The Doolittle Raid, born of desperation, has given them this. It forced Yamamoto to move, and in his arrogant haste, he has shown his hand. Nimitz now knows the where. He also knows the when. The intercepts point to the first week of June. He looks at the map. He is still terrifyingly outnumbered. But he now possesses the single most powerful weapon in naval warfare, the enemy's secret. He will not meet Yamamoto's trap. He will set his own. In the dry docks of Pearl Harbor, 1,400 yard workers swarm the crippled Yorktown. They are told they have 72 hours to make her battle-worthy, a job that should take 3 months. The fate of the Pacific depends on it. Nimitz is gathering his 3 carriers, his task forces, for a rendezvous at a lonely spot of empty ocean, designated Point Luck, northeast of Midway. They will be waiting. May 27, 1942, 6 o'clock hours. Hashirajima, Japan. The sun of a new day strikes the rising sun battle flags of the most powerful naval force ever assembled. This is the Kido Butai, the first carrier striking force, and it is the steel fist of the Japanese Empire. The ships are a vision of industrial might and warrior spirit. The flag carrier Akagi, the veteran Kaga, and the swift sister ships Soryu and Hiryu. These 4 carriers alone have sunk more enemy warships in the last 6 months than any fleet in history. On the bridge of the Akagi, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo stares as the anchors are weighed. He is a torpedo expert, a cautious, meticulous man, not a creature of the air. But his staff is electric with confidence. Men like Commander Minoru Genda, the brilliant, arrogant architect of the Pearl Harbor strike, see this not as a battle, but as a formality. They are afflicted with Sensho Bio, victory disease. Since December, they have known nothing but total, crushing success. They have humiliated the Americans at Pearl Harbor, sunk the British Prince of Wales in Repulse, and swept the Indian Ocean clear. The Doolittle Raid in their minds was a freak show, a stunt by a desperate enemy. It was an insult, yes, but it was the twitch of a dying foe. Now, they will swat that foe for good. Their intelligence picture is dangerously, fatally wrong. They believe the American fleet is shattered. They know the Lexington was sunk at Coral Sea. They believe the Yorktown was also sunk, or at least crippled and back in Pearl. Their consensus is that, at best, the Americans can field 2 carriers, Hornet and Enterprise. The Kido Butai is sailing with 4. The math is simple, and it is on their side. Their mission, Operation MI, is a masterpiece of complexity, and that is its weakness. Admiral Yamamoto, on his flagship Yamato 600 miles to the rear, has split his forces across thousands of miles of ocean. A northern force is heading to the Aleutians as a feint. Nagumo's carriers are the spearhead, tasked with one job: obliterate Midway's air defenses on June 4th. This is the key to their failure. Nagumo and Genda are preparing for an airstrike on an island. They believe the American carriers are still in Pearl Harbor. The plan is that after Midway is hit, the panicked Americans will then sail from Hawaii into the grand trap set by Yamamoto's battleships. No one on the Akagi's bridge imagines that the Americans are already at sea. No one can conceive that the crippled Yorktown, repaired in 72 hours by a miracle of American industry, its flight deck a patchwork of steel plates, is sailing alongside Hornet and Enterprise. As the Kido Butai steams east under a self-imposed radio silence, it is sailing into an information void. They are deaf and blind. 3,000 miles away, northeast of Midway, at the coordinates 32 degrees 14 north, 172 degrees 45 west. Point Luck. The American carriers are waiting. Task Force 16, under the command of Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, a cool, precise battleship admiral who replaced the ailing Bull Halsey, patrols in a wide circle. With him is Task Force 17, the Yorktown, commanded by Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher. They are outnumbered. Their planes, especially the TBD Devastator torpedo bombers, are obsolete. Their pilots, while brave, are not the seasoned, blooded veterans of Nagumo's air groups. But they have Joe Rochefort's secret. They know where the Japanese are going, and they know when. The Doolittle Raid, a mission of bombers, has forced the admirals of the Imperial Navy into this exact patch of ocean. The admirals in Tokyo, who saw the B-25s over the palace, demanded this. Now, they are about to get their decisive battle. But the trap has been reversed. The Kido Butai, the pride of the fleet, is sailing toward the largest ambush in naval history. June 4th, 1942, 4:30 hours. Northwest of Midway, aboard the carrier Akagi. The Kido Butai is alive. The pre-dawn darkness is shattered by the roar of 108 aircraft warming their engines. On the flight decks of Akagi, Kaga, Hiryu, and Soryu, the air crews, the most skilled naval aviators in the world, stand ready. Their target, Midway Atoll, 240 miles to the southeast. At 4:45, under the command of Lieutenant Joichi Tomonaga, the first wave of Nakajima B-5N Kate bombers, Aichi D-3A Val dive bombers, and their escort of Mitsubishi A-6M0 fighters thunders off the decks. They are a perfectly honed weapon, sent to smash the island's defenses, just as planned. On the bridge of the Akagi, Admiral Nagumo is surrounded by the confidence of his staff. He has done his part. He has launched the strike. But he is a cautious man, and Yamamoto's orders have created a fatal contradiction. Order 1, attack Midway. Order 2, be prepared to destroy the American fleet. These two objectives require two different types of ammunition. An attack on an island requires high-explosive land bombs. An attack on a warship requires armor-piercing bombs, and most importantly, Type 91 aerial torpedoes. Nagumo's solution is a compromise. He has sent 108 planes to hit Midway. He holds his second wave, another 93 planes, in reserve on his hangar decks, armed with torpedoes, just in case the American fleet appears. His carriers are now a floating tinderbox, their hangars packed with armed planes, high-explosive torpedoes, and thousands of gallons of aviation fuel. At 5:34, an American PBY Catalina patrol plane, flying out of Midway, spots the Japanese carriers. Its frantic, uncoded message flashes across the Pacific. Enemy carriers, sighted, bearing 320. At Point Luck, 200 miles to the east, Admiral Spruance on the Enterprise receives the report. He knows. Fletcher on the Yorktown knows. The trap is sprung. But first, the Americans at Midway strike. Starting at 07 o'clock, waves of obsolete or mismatched American planes, Marine SBD Dauntlesses, Vought Vindicators, Army B-26 Marauders, and the new TBF Avengers of Torpedo Squadron 8, VT-8, hurl themselves at Nagumo's fleet. It is a massacre. The Zeros of Nagumo's combat air patrol are an impenetrable buzzsaw. They tear the American formations apart. The Marine bombers, slow and clumsy, are picked off one by one. The TBF Avengers, flying low, are all shot down but one. The B-26s, attempting a torpedo run, are ripped by flak and Zeros, their torpedoes splashing harmlessly. Not a single torpedo hits a Japanese ship. Not a single bomb finds its target. To Admiral Nagumo, this is just more proof of Japanese supremacy. The American attacks are suicidal, pathetic. Then, at 7, the message he is waiting for arrives from Lieutenant Tominaga, his strike leader over Midway. There is need for a second attack. Defenses are still active. This is the pivot point, the decisive moment of the entire battle. Nagumo now faces an impossible choice. His first strike failed to neutralize Midway. He must launch a second strike. But his reserve planes, sitting in the hangars, are armed with torpedoes for ships. To hit Midway again, they must be taken from the elevators, moved to the ordnance bay, have their torpedoes removed, and be rearmed with 800-kilogram land bombs. This is a dangerous, complex 40-minute operation. Commander Genda, his aggressive staff officer, argues forcefully. "Admiral, the American fleet is not here. The attacks from Midway were feeble. We must finish the island." Nagumo hesitates. He looks at the empty sky. The American carriers, which Yamamoto promised would be in Pearl Harbor, are nowhere to be seen. He nods. At 07:15, he gives the order. Rearm the second wave for a land attack. The Akagi's flight deck becomes a scene of frantic, heavy labor. Ordnance crews race to the hangar decks. They begin wheeling carts of massive land bombs while simultaneously unbolting the torpedoes. The deadly torpedoes are stacked, unsecured, along the hangar walls, right next to the fuel lines, to make room. Then, at 7:28, disaster. A float plane from the cruiser Tone, launched 30 minutes late due to a catapult malfunction, breaks radio silence. The message makes Nagumo's blood run cold. Sight 10 enemy ships, possibly a carrier, bearing 010, 240 miles from Midway. A carrier. Here. The admirals on the Akagi's bridge stare at each other in stunned silence. Their intelligence was wrong. Their plan is in ruins. The Americans are not in Pearl Harbor. They are here, and they are here now. Nagumo screams a new order. Stop rearming. All planes will be armed with torpedoes. Prepare to attack the enemy ships. The hangar decks descend into pure chaos. The crews, who were just removing torpedoes, are now ordered to put them back on. The carts of land bombs are now in the way, blocking the torpedoes. The elevators are clogged, and the first strike, Tominaga's planes, returning from Midway, are now circling overhead, low on fuel, demanding to land. Nagumo is paralyzed. He can't attack the Americans with his planes in the hangar, and he can't recover his first wave without clearing his flight decks. He has been caught, precisely as the Doolittle Raid had intended, divided, unbalanced, and vulnerable, forced to fight two battles at once. June 4th, 1942, 9:20 hours. Sky above the Kido Butai. Lieutenant Commander John C. Waldron, leading Torpedo Squadron 8 from the USS Hornet, searches the empty ocean. His 15 Douglas TBD Devastator torpedo bombers are obsolete, slow, and hopelessly outmatched. They are flying coffins. Minutes ago, Waldron broke formation from his air group, trusting a gut feeling, a hunch, that the Japanese were not where they were supposed to be. He was right. Smoke, dead ahead. Through the haze he sees them, Nagumo's 4 carriers. He also sees the swarms of Zero fighters circling high above as a combat air patrol. He knows exactly what this is. A one-way trip. His last radio message to his planes is stark. My greatest hope is that we encounter a determined torpedo attack. Let's go in. They drop to 100 feet, spreading out for their torpedo run. They are flying at 110 knots. On the bridge of the Akagi, the Japanese lookouts scream. More Americans. The Zeros, led by aces, peel off and dive. It is not a battle, it is a slaughter. The 20mm cannons of the Z-Zeros tear the Devastators apart. The American .30 caliber machine guns are useless. Planes cartwheel into the sea, trailing fire and fuel. In 6 minutes, all 15 planes of Torpedo 8 are shot down. Only one man, Ensign George Gay, survives, clinging to a seat cushion in the water. Nagumo barely has time to register the attack when, at 9:40, Torpedo Squadron 6 from the Enterprise arrives. They too are massacred. Of 14 planes, 10 are shot down. Then, at 10 o'clock, Torpedo Squadron 3 from the Yorktown appears. They are shredded. 10 of 12 planes are lost. In the space of 40 minutes, 41 American torpedo bombers have been hurled at the Kido Butai. 35 have been destroyed. Not a single torpedo has hit a Japanese carrier. From Nagumo's perspective, it is a stunning vindication of their superiority. The American attacks are pathetic, suicidal. But this victory has created a fatal, unseen vulnerability. Every Zero in the sky, every fighter Nagumo has been pulled down to sea level, chasing the slow-moving torpedo planes. They are all low, out of position, and low on fuel. At 10:20, Nagumo is finally ready. His returning planes from the Midway strike have landed. His flight decks are respotted. His strike force, the elite of the Japanese Navy, is warming its engines, armed with torpedoes, ready to launch and annihilate the American carriers. The red flag is about to go up. At that exact second, 19,000 feet above, 2 American dive bomber squadrons are lost. Lieutenant Commander C. Wade McCluskey, leading 32 SBD Dauntlesses from the Enterprise, has reached his intercept point. The ocean is empty. His fuel is critical. He is about to turn back. Then, he spots a thin white line on the blue water. The wake of a lone Japanese destroyer, the Arashi, racing north. The destroyer had stayed behind to depth charge an American submarine and is now racing to rejoin the fleet. McCluskey makes the most important decision of the war. He turns to follow it. At 10:22, he breaks through the clouds. Below him, shimmering in the sun, is the entire Kido Butai. And, on the decks of the carriers Akagi and Kaga are hundreds of planes, fueling hoses, and carts of bombs. They are, for this 1 minute, completely defenseless from above. Simultaneously, Lieutenant Commander Max Leslie, leading Yorktown's bombers, arrives from a different direction, spotting the carrier Soryu. McCluskey keys his radio. McCluskey to all planes, attack, attack. On the Akagi's bridge, a lookout screams, pointing not at the horizon, but straight up. The Japanese sailors look up. They see the sun glinting off the silver wings of American SBDs as they roll into their 70-degree dives, their dive flaps breaking, a high, terrifying shriek filling the air. It is the sound of retribution. The zeros are too low. There is no time. The flak guns open up, but it's too late. At 10:25, 3 bombs from Lieutenant Dick Best's group slam into the Akagi. One hits the center elevator and plunges into the hangar deck. It ignites the stacked torpedoes, the land bombs, the fuel, and the planes. The Kido Butai's flagship is instantly a raging inferno. Seconds later, bombs tear the Kaga apart. At the same time, Leslie's bombers put 3 1,000-pound bombs into the Soryu. In less than 5 minutes, the 3 carriers that had led the attack on Pearl Harbor, the 3 carriers that were untouchable, are now burning, exploding wrecks. The Doolittle Raid, the desperate gamble from the Hornet 6 weeks prior, has been answered. The Japanese admirals who had seen those B-25s over Tokyo, who had demanded this operation to restore their honor, have just led their navy into the greatest disaster in its history.